Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to experiment with some images on the web. And putting images on web pages is probably one of the first things you would do, but I'm going to tackle some of the issues right now. So I've got a web page set up here. Images on the web. That'll be my headline one. So let's see, I've got an HTML5 page, doc type definition. The head section has my title. Character encoding meta has an author meta in there. I do have some, I'm set up for some internal styles, so I am going to use some style sheets on this one today. And then I simply have a heading. Headline 1, actually, I should say the word headline 1 instead of heading. There is a header tag now, so we don't want to confuse the header tag with the head section with the headline 1. Okay, so there's my plain old web page. And what I'm going to do first is go ahead and put on an image. It's really easy to do. So images are inline elements, so it's always best to put them inside of a block element. In this case, I'm going to use a logical division tag or a div tag, standard block element, and within that I'll go ahead and create the image element. So the image tag has a source attribute, has an alt attribute, okay, and then there are some other attributes also. For instance, there's the title attribute, and there's also the long description attribute, okay? And then it finishes off. In HTML5, you don't have to put a trailing slash. In XHTML, image tags would have a space and a slash at the end of the tag, but in HTML5, we don't need to do that. So we've got these 4 attributes here, and by the way, there's others. There's width and there's height. But I'm going to take out title and long description. They kind of serve the same purpose. Title gives more text information to the image. Long description, exactly what you might think if you need to provide more text information about the image. I'm going to keep the alt attribute in there because I like the alt attribute, and it's an important one for image tags. Alt stands for alternate text and is used to provide or describe the purpose of the image. Now, if the image is simply a visual element, let's say you had a horizontal scrolly image, dividing 2 parts of your page, then you would do alt with an empty set of quotes. It has no functional purpose on the page. But some images do have a purpose. For instance, maybe it's a big red arrow that a person is supposed to click in order to go to the next page. Well, if that was the case, then my alternate text would be advance to next page, the purpose of that image. If it's a photograph, then I might put in a little bit of information about what it is. So I'm going to insert a photograph from cyclocross, so photo from cyclocross event. Okay. Now, the source is obviously very important. That's where you actually put in the image file name. In this case, I'm going to put in my file name, which is cyclocross.jpg. Now, since my image file is in the same folder as my HTML file, all I need to do is refer to that image's file name. If they share the same folder, then the path is simply the file name. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Oops. Undo. There we go, and I can go back to my web page and reload. There, and I've got a picture loading up on my web page. So that's pretty easy to do. It's really no problem getting an image onto a web page. Now, let's do a little bit of experimentation with this image. Let's say the image is a bit bigger than what I want, so I'm going to resize it. So I'll jump back over to my editor, and there's a couple ways I can do this. I can resize it with HTML, or I can resize it with CSS, or there's a third better way. Let me do these first couple ways. And I'm going to just put this on a separate line so it's nice and clear. So I have 2 attributes right now inside of my image tag. And I never closed my div tag, it looks like, so let me take care of that too. There we go. Now my div tag is closed. And let's see, I'm also going to put in, I'll do width equals, let's see, 320, and height equals 240. And let me put this over here. There we go. So now I have 4 attributes inside of my image tag. The source and the alt, source and alternate text, now the width and the height. So if I save this, go back to my browser and reload, you can see that image is a lot smaller. But let me point something out. This is not a good way to resize really big images. So this photograph, let me actually go back here for a second. I'm going to take this part out. I'm going to cut that, save, back to the browser, refresh. This image, if I go to view my image info, I can see that it's 640 by 480, and even though you can't see the file size here because it's saved locally, it's actually about 250 kilobytes. Okay, so it's 250K. So you just have to kind of trust me on that. I could bring it up here. Let's see, do I have a folder open? I don't. So yeah, it's kind of a big image. And I'm actually getting it right here. This is off my Flickr page. So here's where the actual image is. And I can go to view image info, and it's about 260 kilobytes. Okay. Now, if you resize an image using HTML or CSS, you do change how the image looks on the browser, but you're not actually changing the file size of the image. So this image is still 260K. So this is why sometimes you'll go to a website and you'll see a relatively small looking image, but it seems to download really slow. And that's because someone just took their really big image. And this is a problem if you get an image right off your digital camera. Some of those images can easily be 2 or 3 or 4 megabytes. And if you just stick it on a web page and resize it simply, it's using up bandwidth, and it's not enhancing the user experience. So the best way to resize those images is to load that image up in your photo editor, your Photoshop, Picnic, online, picnic.com, P-I-C-N-I-K. View is a great free downloadable image editor. And literally resize the image, make a new image file out of that, and that's the one you would put up on the web. Okay. So a little bit about resizing, and let me just put in, there's another technique you can, by the way, if you only put in one unit of measurement, let's say width, it'll keep the proportions of that image. So if I change this to width 400, save it, it'll make it bigger, but it'll keep in those proportions. And that works the same way with style. So I could do an inline style. Style equals width colon 500 px for 500 pixels. This will size my image proportionately. There we go. Or I could scale this back down to 200, save it, refresh, and now it's a lot smaller. Okay, so a little bit of basics there with images. Still not the best way to resize, but good enough for now. So getting an image on a web page, simply use the image tag. Now if I want to make this image into a hyperlink, ahref equals, and let's see, I think I'll just jump over to my Flickr page. There's the main one. Copy. So it's a big long hyperlink there, and then I'll put a closing anchor tag down here. So my image is completely surrounded by an opening anchor tag and a closing anchor tag, and the hyperreference attribute points to the location of this image out on the web. Okay, so let me save that, jump to my browser. Oops, wrong one. Refresh. Now this image is a hyperlink, and if I mouse over it, I can see I'm getting a little hand there. It shows me it's a hyperlink. If I click on it, that'll take me over to the Flickr version of it. So that's making an image into a hyperlink. Now let me point out something since I have this address here. There's another there's something else some people might do where they take the location of an image off the web and they stick that in the source. Okay, so now the image on Flickr's server is now my image source, and if I save this, go to my browser and refresh, you don't notice any difference. But this is something you probably want to avoid doing. This is called hotlinking an image. Basically, it's when you refer to an image that's not on your own server, and it's generally not a good thing to do. For one thing, my image display on my web page now is tied to the image over here somewhere else on somebody else's server that I can't control. If they remove that image or change that image, it will affect my web page. It's also not ethical to do because it uses up the bandwidth on somebody else's server. Every time my web page loads, then the owner of this image is going to get a hit, with a few kilobytes. All right, it's going to use up some of the bandwidth on their server, yet it's not actually bringing traffic to their site. So you don't want to hotlink images. It's best to have the image on your own computer, whether it's in the same folder as your HTML file or whether you keep it in an images subfolder related to your web pages. It's best to refer to images on your own server in your own website. So just keep that in mind. Now I want to do a little bit more with this image, but I think I'll carry on to another video so that we can use some CSS in order to float our image and also to use it as a background.